Everyone, and welcome to our second presentation in our in the Save California Salmon second module for environmental justice. My name is Indigenous Environmental Justice. My name is Brittani Orona, and I'm a member of the Hoopa Valley Tribe in Northern California, and also a board advisor for Save California Salmon and a PhD candidate at UC Davis in Native American Studies. And I'm really happy and honored to be here today to moderate the session on arts as activism, land, water, and life with our great panelists today, Julian Lang, Lynn Risling, and Kateri Maston. Before we get into the program, I just want to acknowledge that the lands that I am currently on are the Miwok and Nisenan Maidu, within the Miwok and Nisenan Maidu territories. I'm based in Sacramento, and I think it's really important to acknowledge the places that we're at and really consider how we are living in those places, uplifting the stories of Indigenous histories in the places that we're at, and to always be considering that this land is Indigenous land. And if you're following news in Indian country, you'll know about the Supreme Court case that our Muskogee Creek relatives had a victory about. So if you are interested in that case, please keep following it and see its implications throughout Indian country. I also want to thank Save California Salmon and the Humboldt State University's Native American Studies program for sponsoring this amazing web series and also allowing me to participate and be involved in this. I'm really humbled and honored to be here. If you are interested in helping out, please consider donating money to both Save California Salmon, donating your time, and all the good things that you can do for the organization and for Humboldt State University's Native American Studies program. If you have any questions throughout this presentation, we will be having a question and answer session at about 1 o'clock, I believe. And please feel free to put questions in the Q&A boxes below in your Zoom or through Facebook live stream, and we will be working towards getting those out. So today I would like to introduce our first speaker, Julian Lang, and I will be share screening his presentation, and I will be passing it over to him right now.
Julian, you're muted.
Do you want me to just resume or start over? No, I'm just kidding. All right, so hi, I'm Julian Lang, and I am here in McKinleyville, and up in northwestern California. The local river that we have here is called the Patawat in the Wiyot language. This is the upper end of the Wiyot territory, and then there's a Wiyot, which is the Humboldt Bay, and then not Wiyot, no, Wiki is the Humboldt Bay, and Wiyot is the Eel River. And so it's one part of the whole system of all the rivers that we have up here in northwestern California. And this is Wiyot land. There's so much to talk about. Where could we possibly begin? And I'm a member of the Karuk tribe. The Karuk tribe is Hokan-speaking people upriver. about 60 miles up the Klamath River. Our boundary is at Bluff Creek. And from Bluff Creek, you go all the way up the river up to the Syad Valley, which is, I don't know, 80 miles, I think, up the Klamath River. And included on that river is the Salmon River and lots of major streams and creeks and all of that feed as tributaries into the Klamath. And so that it's our land, Nanu Thivthanen, we call it. I've been doing a lot of language teaching in the last number of years, 20 years, 30 years actually, but really have gotten into trying to help in the process of creating new speakers. It's our new mantra is not to learn your language, but to become a speaker and to create new speakers. That's our goal. And it's connected with this idea of environment, and it's connected with this idea that we're discussing today, this idea of salmon, and the water, and all of that. It's what I've been saying lately is that our language is the key that opens the door, and beyond that door is an indigenous consciousness, I think, an indigenous worldview. So this first picture, for instance, represents that, everything that we are. And so actually, I guess we reversed the slide. I wonder if we can go to the slide 2 then. Yeah. Oh, no, slide 3. There, that one. So this is the center of the world at high water in wintertime. This is the whole area. The center of the photo there is what we call Katimin Ba'in, and that is the falls. And it's now totally inundated with the river. The mountain to the left there is called Wiyot, and that is the mountain who is above us, and it overlooks and is a protector for Katimin. And we say that that person was once a man, and when they were our belief is that we have spirits that lived here in this world before the human beings arrived, and that person decided to become this mountain rather than leave the earth and go across the ocean, this land, and go across the ocean to the spirit world, we call it. And so he decided that he would stay here, and he would stand up above, up above. And then he decided, well, what will the human beings do? So this person, this mountain, taught us everything to live, from fishing, hunting. All of our livelihood comes from this mountain. So that's very, very important to our cultural understanding of our relationship between the human being and the land, that this is all one place. Now, if we go back to the first photo again. So here is the same place at more normal late fall flows. And if you look at the very, very center, you can't really see it very well, but there's a flat rock down there, right in the very middle of the photograph. And that flat rock just off the river there, that is the place where the fishermen go. So this here is called the Imwid, the Eid, and it's where all the salmon for the people is caught. Families had fisheries all along the Klamath River, but this place was the people's Eid, and it was owned and operated by and for the Indian people, Karuk people at Katimin. And it was owned by days. So each day was separated into morning and afternoon. And so you had rights, your family had rights to fish at these places during the morning and during the afternoon. And so family, it was very important because you would catch enough salmon at that point to for your whole family for the year, and also to be able to provide for other families who were not able or who did not have that fishing right. And then, for example, in the Second World War, my grandmother's uncle, Uncle Johnny Pepper, was one of the only able-bodied men that was still around at that time. He was an older man, but he was able to go. So he inherited all of these fishing rights for these days. So every family, they would say, "This is you fish for me. I have these times," and they would go down and fish for the people. And then the fishermen would divvy up the fish to the fish owner, the fish day owner. We call them fish days. And so there's a very, very important place. Okay, now we can go to the next slide. Yeah, this is the downriver edge. This is Asanam Karuk. This is Utimin. So the downriver falls, and this here is at Ike's Flat. It's on the left there, and on the right is Amekiadam. And Amekiadam is where we say that the salmon came from, where when the human beings arrived. This is where salmon was actually being kept, and Lynn had did a big painting with high school students, which she'll show you later, which talks of this place and the creation story associated with it. Amekiada means salmon, and Ikiada means where it is made, or the place that it is made. And so Amekiadam is the site of the what they call the mountain dance, and the jump dance held a 10-day world renewal ceremony. And so this is a very important place, and it's all within, pretty much shouting distance. Not really, but I mean, it's like within a mile of each place is located, like, say, a mile apart. And so this is on the Klamath River, a little place called Somsvar, very small little place. 250 people are there when everybody's home. And so it's a small but very powerful place. And I think that's one of the important things that Native people can teach society, is that, your centers are sacred places and should not be populated by like the cities are these days. These places are sacred and they need to remain natural. They should not be converted into, properties for, with values going through the sky and all of this kind of stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of start with those, and then we can move on with our photos. I wanted to show, so this is a photograph of a couple at Katamin. This here happens to be at a place called Everelsfield, which is just above Katamin. And I wanted to show it because it kind of represents the first human, the first human being, the first couple, and how human beings came into this world, that they came in with the idea that they were agreeing to live by the laws that were contained and passed on in these things called our stories, our creation stories, Pikwa. The Pikwa are that contains everything that we need. The Pikwa are the stories, and then associated with that is the anab, or the medicine formula, that is also a basis. So the Pikwa tells us the story of how it all happened, but then the anab tells us how it was used and how to harness the power of the ikade, of that is being talked about in that Pikwa. So they had a process. So they were able to say, this is their story. And now this is the process that they lined out for us to be able to harness that. And it includes everything from the salmon, the idea of the salmon being a man and a woman, that they, when they were released at Amekiaram from that house at Amekiaram, the salmon went down, and they say at the mouth, the man is on one side of the river, and the woman is at the other side of the river, and that the man is kind of more in vigil, kind of holding, protecting, and the woman is the one who calls them in. So during the salmon runs, that this is the one that says, okay, now, and then they come and the runs begin. And that's where all the anadromous fish on the clama. So anyway, and go forward. So art is a very, for me, it's been, pretty much a lifestyle. I've been, I make as much money as I need to exist and live, and then I try to, but in the process, create as much time as I can in creating artwork. And my artwork has changed over the years. It evolves. It goes one extreme to the next. You could say I'm kind of an extremist, but in a good way, not in a too much in a bad way, hopefully. And go ahead and change. So this is one example of a work that fairly recent work, I think, from last year, beginning of last year, I think. And it represents where this is the word that the Ikadeum asked, where have you all gone? Because it's the human beings. This is the recurring theme, is that we are the human being, and we are not nature in the sense that nature is free. Nature, and that is the role of the human being, to keep nature free. That's our job. That's our job, is to to really promote the diversity in the world, the natural biological diversity in the world. That's our job. That's what we're here for. And the idea of creating freedom for nature to prosper and to just be itself. The nature needs to be free, and then the human beings, we are the ones that require laws, that we're the ones that are bound by laws to maintain that relationship with the nature. That's the way they set it up, that human beings will always need to have laws because, of these things called greed, which we've seen a lot of that lately, because of these things called, I guess, I don't know, avarice and, pride, all these different things that humans end up feeling. And so that's why it's really important that our main God and our main principle is the nature of our land, of who we are, where we live, where we come from. That is the one who is in charge. And we think of it in terms of a man and a woman, that everything comes in pairs as a man and a woman, and each has its role within that natural, within that particular natural world idea. So hukahira imku, to where have you gone? Because we say that they all left. The spirits of the world left at one point. And when we ask for their help, that's what we're saying. Where did you guys go? And then they will reveal to us their location on this land, if they're still here, or wherever they are. And then we can pray to them. And they will guide us, they will give us, and all of that. Okay, next slide. So the idea of resistance, the idea of political, the idea of legal, these are all kind of modern dilemmas that did not exist. It's kind of like being invaded, which is what we are. The colonial boot is still pretty much hanging over us in many places. Some places it's right, the boot's right on our necks. And so, but the idea of resistance and activistic kinds of active, resistance and protest and is really an important part of who we are today, if we are to fulfill our role as human beings. And if we don't care about that, then maybe this isn't as important. But if we want to be a human being, if we want to be the kind of person that that we were told was the ideal person, the human being that that would be protective of nature, that would be a believer in all of these things called culture, then in a way this represents us. So who is it? It's Crane, the idea of no dapple. There's a song that we kind of created. There's a song in our language of the crane. And the crane is a funny person because he's a fisherman. And so he walks along the shores and he catches fish periodically and whatever's in along the shore. And his song is real funny. He goes, "Na wada khajifat kuspanim yati, na wada khajifat kuspanim yati, na wada khajifat kuspanim yati, na wada khajifat kuspanim yati." Wako pani amte, kanchip pani amte. So he says that I am alive. I live because of frogs. He said, if it wasn't for those frogs, I wouldn't be around anymore. And so, so we adapted that during the Dakota pipeline period back on the plains. What's that been? Almost 2 years ago by now. And recent, it finally got shut down, and they said, so it's been really great. So Crane's a pretty powerful person if we think about it, that, because we adapted his song and we said, Ishaha kus panimyati. It's because of water that I am alive as a human being. So we were able to kind of take that traditional song and create a new way of looking at our activism, that we're just being ourselves. We're not trying to be anybody else. We're not trying to be leaders of this and that. We're going to be home. I mean, we're home bodies. If you think about it, in Northwestern California, I think we're all pretty much home bodies, and that's the way we are. So next slide. Hopefully, I'm not gone too far over time. This here is another painting that I recently did. It represents. It was a steelhead, a call for art to create steelhead, something representing steelhead. So, as I was thinking, I have my painting process is to just bomb a canvas with color, could be one color, couple of colors, and just kind of smoosh it all around, and then stand back and look and see what story is in there that's trying to come out. And so I do it that way, and I did it. So in the far back, you can see some different colors, ground colors, and suddenly, and I got all of these. There's a local photographer who does a lot of underwater photography of anadromous fish, salmon, steelhead, and sturgeon, eels, and all of that. And so I was watching those, and and I was just having a really hard time. How do you be so literal, preserving, protecting the water and the land and all that? How can you be so literal? I have a hard time doing that. Some people are really graphically strong, like Lynn, you'll find out later. She's able to take a lot of different ideas like that and combine them in a really clear graphic way. I tend to I tend to think, I don't know how I think, really, to be honest. And but so this is what happens. So the steelhead and salmon have this kind of it's a really light red line along the length of their body. So the first thing that really happened was that red circle. And so I just did it. I had no clue what I was doing. So, and I went, oh, that is the sign. That's that line on the side of the fish. And it's kind of that color. And so based on that, everything just kind of came together, and it just within, a day or two, it was done. And it kind of combines all of those things: the depth of the water, the flow, the interconnectedness, and all of that. And so anyway, that's kind of was my submission for that particular call for art. See, is there another one? And then finally, I work a lot with youth, and I think that's kind of one of the great things. I guess, I said when it comes to language, our goal is to create new speakers. And in working with youth, the goal is creating new human beings. And so working with youth, we've done lots of things. In fact, where Kateri had previously worked in their kind of break room, or I don't know what that room was that was off on not on the side you were on, but on the other side, the long room there, conference room of some sort. Anyway, we would go in there, and we used to do youth programs for years. And one of the things we would do is periodically is pull out a big piece of canvas, and then create these canvases, paintings. And so one was Because It's Sacred. So this is I don't know, I think they were all under 18, and I think there were maybe 8 was just the youngest that they were. All these youth. And then so we painted this thing, and so because it's sacred, and that was one of the things about the river. Why is it sacred? It's because it is sacred. It is sacred. It's a sacred thing, the water. And then surrounded around that is the human beings and our relationship with it, nature, and then how each of us as human beings are connected with that nature as well. So anyway, that's all but done by a bunch of kids, and it was like, wow, that's really nice. You guys did a fantastic job. So I don't know why the ear is down there, but I guess you have to listen too. So I'm ready now to listen to other folks. And so I thank you very much, Brittani, for inviting me to this. There's a bunch of other things. I wanted to end with this. This is one of our youth that we've been working with, and Zoe. So this was her first ceremony in a way. I don't know if she had danced with the Ptolemies or not yet, but this was at Chapek a number of years ago, and it was all, everybody had finished up and everybody was sitting and getting ready to pack up and go home, because the ceremony is just that. You could see some of the other youth up in the right-hand corner up there. This was people from the river schools. This is the Klamath and Salmon River schools. They would have periodic gatherings on the Salmon River in this case, and we would tell them stories and try to give some kind of value, cultural knowledge, pass it on to all the young people. So that's a really, I think where we are now is really working with youth and language and connecting them with that vast body of knowledge known as Indian culture and Indian law. So thank you very much.
It's on mute now.
Huh?
Did you
It's
put
on. No.
Hi, I was talking and I didn't realize I was on mute. So thank you everybody for your patience as we are learning through technology in this new place that we're at in these really difficult times. So I'm still learning through how to do PowerPoint really well. But thank you, Julian. That was an amazing presentation. And I so appreciate hearing you talk and speak about those very, very important ways that art has engaged our culture on the North Coast. So I am going to now pass the presentation over to Kateri Maston. So Kateri, are you ready?
I'll do my best. Thank you, Brittany and Carrie, for facilitating this meeting and for all of your hard work. And so my name is Kateri. I'm a Hoopa tribal member up here on the North Coast, also a Karuk and Wiyot descendant. I am a board treasurer for the Native Women's Collective, which is a nonprofit grassroots organization with the focus of promoting and uplifting Native artists. I'm also a committee member for the Neelis Hall Committee, which is a part of the Clark Museum, which houses a large collection of our local baskets and regalia. And my work with them is just to ensure that their collections are being cared for in the best way possible. So yeah, you'll through the slideshow, you'll be seeing some of my work that I've done. I've been weaving baskets for the better part of a couple decades. And also over the past just single decade, been focusing on regalia making. Yeah, so when Brittany first came to me about being a panelist on this discussion, I thought, activist, that's not any word that I would use to describe myself, but definitely an artist. A lot of my work goes hand in hand with the water sources here. Basketry, our type of basketry cannot be done without the use of water. A lot of my materials are gathered along the river in our area, so really dependent upon that source, and the connection that we have being river people. It's all a big large ecosystem of what makes us unique. We are salmon people, like Julian said. There's a whole, there's various stories with that connection to those relatives for us. There's a lot of I guess motions or movements that happen with all of the different elements of, gathering and weaving, and it's all done for me, myself, it's all done with my family or those people that may be interested in learning, or, I've never go out individually by myself, but it's all a learning process too, and a sharing process. Some of the baskets that you see now, like this one as well, are just baby baskets that we use to carry our infants. They are really unique in a way that they prop the baby up. There have been some interesting studies on how it's beneficial for the babies. I've never heard of any sudden infant death syndrome within the baby basket. And also I found it interesting that I too had come across a document that said that just the way that the baby sits in these baskets, there's a great deal of increase of oxygen flow. So their bodies are circulating oxygen better, which I thought was really interesting. What's mind-blowing to me is all of the materials that are used for creating these baskets, and just the thought process of our ancestors when these first were being created, and how it even came about that this was what we were going to use. That still blows my mind every day, every time I pick up some of my materials. To me, it's a great teacher, just the artistry of basketry. It's really shaped me as a person growing up. Just the amount of patience and discipline and dedication it takes to create some of these items that are still used today. There was a big gap just in trying to find, I guess, what used to be a normal amount of weavers. Today, it's actually nice to see that there are a lot of men and women who are continuing this tradition. But it's not anywhere where it used to be. I've attended many gatherings of Native weavers in this area, and the population is pretty small, but it's still there, which is promising for our future. The use, and I'm going to say for this basket in particular, the yellow is actually how we weave with porcupine quills, which is very different from our relatives moving east way. And now I lost my track of thought because I saw that, and I wanted to tell you guys about the porcupine quills, because it is different. It is a different way to use them, and just how our ancestors may have come to find out that there is a certain type of moss and a certain type of root that you can collect and gather in a process that creates this beautiful, brilliant yellow color. Still a part of that. But what is also an interesting story that I'd like to share from growing up with weavers in my family and learning from them about how our caps and our clothes weave baskets are started. You know, we call them a button, and it's kind of cool because it starts in a very small spiral and it just continues to grow, and it's in just the circular pattern and the tight weave that encloses it. But there's a connection to like a person's belly button and what that represents of our mothers being our lifelines from for our evolution, for that connection of mother and infant, and that lifeline of the umbilical cord, which I think is a really pretty correlation. This picture here is my daughter's ceremonial dress. Water there. Water also being represented on the dress through the abalone. And a lot of, depending on what region you're from, whether you're on the coast or you're inland, really kind of sets the tone for a ceremonial dress. Hers has both land and water elements that represent all of our ancestral relatives. So yeah, that was a big project. I gathered from the start that I knew that she was going to be a girl. It's a lot of collecting throughout the years, and also envisioning what some of those, what that's going to look like for her. She did a lot of work herself, and one of the beautiful things about this process and is my ability to guide her along, but it's a really big bonding process, and she's my only daughter, and so it was really really emotional, and I guess for the lack of a better word, it was just a really great experience to have, to build that and grow together with her. But as you can see, there's countless hours of work. That's where the patience comes in with any kind of art medium that you're doing, and sometimes it's ripping everything out and starting all over again, which is, sometimes happens in life. This is a photo of me gathering a plant called iris with my dad. And like I said, we're always out in groups. And I'm going to be learning the process of creating string with the iris fibers, which I'm really excited about, but it's also very time consuming. And well, just like anything, all of the harvesting, I think, is the easiest part, and the processing is the most tedious. And there's all these different stages that it takes to actually create something in its final stage. So there's gathering, harvesting, and actually working on whether it's basketry or the whatever. This has been one of my working projects for a few years now. It's Julian mentioned briefly earlier about a jump dance ceremony, talking about when he was explaining about Amikiatum. These baskets, and and also too talking, Julian, when you mentioned about that balance, everything coming in pairs, like the balance of the men and women. What's beautiful about this particular basket for this particular ceremony is, you know, the women do the weaving and the men do the finish up work of the basket, which I think is really, really a beautiful way to incorporate that ceremonial item. So I guess what I wanted to mention also is the connection, because I had to think about, you know, the word activism and where I fit into that, and looking at how our whole ecosystem kind of works together, and there's small pieces, there's large pieces, but they all kind of intertwine, and they all provide a strength for that system. And so I guess I was able to relate, you know, my small artistry as a part of that activism, because I am in the elements of nature all the time for gathering my materials or working on, you know, weaving. My favorite thing is to go to the river and weave. And so recognizing that water system is really important. We're river people, we depend on our salmon, and in order for the water to thrive and be healthy, we also need to make sure that we're providing the best protection we can for that. So yeah, I guess this is a photo of me doing, through the Native Women's Collective, we did a workshop, woven with roots, and I was just doing a demonstration to go over some of the typical basket materials, the gathering seasons, because all of our materials are gathered throughout the year in different seasons when they're ready, as well as some different types of baskets that are in their functions. Sorry, I'm a little distracted with my little, I call him a cub because he's very much so like a little bear cub. But yeah, I think I'll conclude there. I'm happy to facilitate any questions if you guys have questions towards the end. Julian, thank you for your words, your song, and your stories.
Thank you, Kateri. That was great. I really appreciate your, I just appreciate you. I really appreciate you and the work that you do. And I was lucky enough to go to this workshop when it occurred. I think it was in 2013. And then also I want to throw in a plug of support for the Native Women's Collective. It's a really, I'm a member of the Native Women's Collective. It's a really important space for us to come together and do our traditional works such as this. Like I probably wouldn't have been exposed to it without the Native Women's Collective and Kateri and the great people who run that organization. So I just want to give a shout out to them as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Lynn to give her presentation and talk. So Lynn, are you ready?
Yes.
Great. Let me be sure I get this right. Okay, there you go.
So Ayuki Kowada, Nanathui Lynn Risling, I'm a member of the Hupa tribe and a descendant of the Karuk and Yurok people. And like Julian said, where do you start? I never thought, like Kateri, I never think of myself as an activist so much, but an artist I am. And, you know, other things, I'm a grandmother now. And, but when I started thinking about it and looking back on my life, I realized, well, I was born in a family of activists, starting with my grandfather, who did many things to help our, you know, our people, his people, through education, through, you know, trying to bring back culture and all these different things. And it filtered down through his children and his grandchildren. And I'm thankful for that experience, those experiences in growing up, and what I learned, not just from him, but other relatives, aunts that were basket weavers, and also contemporary artists. And there was a time when it was hard to gather materials for baskets. And so my aunt and some of her sisters and other women started a pottery guild, and they used natural clay from our area, even though traditionally our ancestors were not potters, but they started doing pottery using the native clay and incorporating the basket designs onto the pottery, because at that time there wasn't very many people still weaving, and it was hard to get materials. But then that changed later on when my aunt decided we needed to have our basket classes. And so she was able with others to get that started, and then started making other types of jewelry using traditional materials and incorporating basket medallions in that, and kind of started this whole art form, more of a contemporary, you might say, art form that's continued on today, and it's actually grown throughout California. So there's a lot of people that are doing this type of art form using traditional items. So anyway, my father was an activist on a lot of different levels, both you know, locally as well as nationally, especially in Indian education. And so I was surrounded by these people and influenced my life in a lot of ways. But also there was, through that, there was activism going on. Like when I first started college in the early, well, it was late 60s, early 70s. That's the time of the civil rights. And then a lot of other things came from that, including, you know, the Native people with American Indian movement and Alcatraz and many other things. And my father was involved in getting a university started, All Indian University in Davis called DQU. So there were many things going around me that influenced my life, but I was an artist at heart. And when I started college, I wanted to study a lot of different things. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I ended up in art. And one of the people that was an influence on me was a Navajo artist who was a teacher. I took a couple classes from him, you know, and I was, at that time, I was just learning a lot of different things about art, but he motivated me and inspired me to do art that was related to my own culture and my own Indian identity. And that's kind of where I took off as far as art, in the direction that it has grown and become, and who I am now as an artist. And this piece, this is moving forward, you know, many years ahead. I had an opportunity to teach a class at McKinleyville High with Native students through a grant through the Humboldt Area Foundation locally. And so I got this grant to do a collaborative piece with people in the community. And so I chose to work with these students at McKinleyville High, and I chose the theme of salmon as to teach art. So it was a regular art class, but I chose salmon as a theme. So we started out with, well, this piece isn't that the students did, but this was, that process of working with those students was kind of an inspiration for me to really look at the importance of salmon in our tribal people's lives, not just traditionally, but today. And so this was one of the pieces that I did myself, and I'll get to the other pieces that I did with students. But this one here, Swim Up the River, has a little short poem. It's called Swim Up the River, Don't Go with the Flow. Let's see, swim up the river, don't go with the flow. We'll find our way home again. It's not far to go. So this piece was about, of course, the salmon going up to their spawning grounds, but it was also about us as human beings, that sometimes we have to swim against the river, swim against the current in order to do the right thing, that we have to stand up for what we believe in and do the right thing in terms of our environment and taking care of the world and the earth. So that's what this one is about. So you can change it to the next one. This represents the Klamath River that Julian showed some photographs of, and it's called Chemyach Ik Ishyat, and it's a part of a prayer that is told at the end of our traditional stories during the winter time, and it has to do with bringing or praying for the salmon to return in the spring, and the stories were told during the winter time. And so, you know, it made sense, like during the winter time when we don't have the salmon running and we don't have all the resources available as far as food, that it was really important to ensure that we have the return of the salmon in our rivers, because salmon was, you know, one of our main sources of food. And we also did ceremonies, as Julian mentioned, and Kateri, in regards to the jump dance. And we also have a ceremony called the white deerskin dance, which is, those are both considered world renewal ceremonies to bring back balance into the world, to give thanks for all the things that the earth has provided in the past year or a couple of years, and to pray that we have a future of resources with the waters, the river, the salmon, and all the life that the rivers give. And the deer represents really the spiritual realm, but it also connects us to the earth and reminds us that we are connected to both the spiritual world above us and the earth below us, and that we are part of it all. It's all connected. So we can go on to the next. Julian mentioned a story about how the salmon came to be, and they're at the place at Amekiaram, and how the salmon, in the story, that there were two old women that were hiding the salmon underneath their house in the water below their house. And so all the beings below did not have the salmon, and Coyote had learned about these women. So I'm not going to do the old story, but he was able to trick them and release all the salmon from underneath the house into the rivers. And this is a piece I did with the students at McKinleyville High. They painted all the salmon sitting at their desk, and then we glued the salmon onto the piece, but they also were involved in painting the whole piece. And this was a 6 by 6 foot panel, and we did 4 of them during that year. And again, it was a whole year of the theme was about the salmon and the importance of the salmon to our ancestors, and then bringing us to the current time. It also included a piece that I didn't, that's not part of this PowerPoint, but it shows the traditional methods of salmon fishing that our ancestors did, and also up into the present day of gill net fishing, and also a ceremony we call the first salmon ceremony that would happen with all of the tribes in our area. The Hupa, the Yurok, the Karuk did a salmon ceremony to bring back the salmon at the beginning of the salmon runs in the spring. And so it was a very sacred ceremony, as we were all, I guess, have all mentioned the sacredness of the waters, of the rivers, and of the of the salmon to our people. These are all, this is the life force of our people, these rivers and the life that it provides for our people. Okay, the next. This was another one we did about the life cycle of the salmon, from the spawning fish in the corner in the right, laying the eggs, and then all the stages of the salmon as they're growing and eventually swimming down the river to the mouth of the river, of the Klamath River, and going into the estuary where they get acclimated to the water, the two fresh water and the salt water mixed in the estuary, and then they eventually swim out into the ocean, and they remain there from 5 to 7 years before they come back to their original spawning ground at different places on the river. Each fish knows where to go. So it's pretty amazing. Okay. And this was also another piece we did. Again, they're like 6 feet by 6 feet canvas panels. And this was to show what's been going on more recently concerning our salmon and the issues around the water and the dams that are on the Klamath River throughout the Klamath River Basin. That goes from the Northern California up into the lower part of Oregon. And this was in 2006 and 7. And during that time, there was some hearings going on regarding the removal of the dams on the Klamath River. And these are issues that are still going on today and haven't been totally resolved. We still have the dams, and there's been legislation passed to remove the dams, but it takes money and it takes a government effort, as well as a lot of other people, to do that. So we're still waiting for that to happen. But this is a very educational moment for not only the students, but for myself. A couple of students and myself went to one of the hearings, and so the issues had to do with our tribal sovereignty and fishing rights and water rights, but there we were up against farmers in Oregon that are using the same water source for farming, and then the commercial fishermen. So there was different people that have a stake in this water. And during that year of 2002, there was a big fish kill that happened on the rivers, on the Klamath River, that had to do with warm temperatures from drought, and also this parasite that grows, that really grows a lot during warm, temperature rises. And then because of the dams, the low water, levels. And so that combination created this large fish kill. And then of course, the farmers also wanting that water for their farming. So anyway, it was a very educational experience for all of us, and brought awareness to us, me more so than I had in the past. And something, looking at the water and looking, because I grew up with salmon like many of us did, and you kind of take it for granted that it'll always be there, but we can't take it for granted. Okay. This is just a painting I did, having to do with salmon and the salmon returning to their spawning ground. Okay. This is a piece I did. It has to do with the same issues around salmon and swimming against the current, like I mentioned in the other piece that I did. And in the lower right-hand corner, different kinds of industry that affect our environment, from the oil extraction and industry to the uranium nuclear power plants and dams on the rivers, and how the devastation, the effect it can have on our waters, our rivers, our salmon, and other life sources that are in the rivers, and that we are connected in this way to the salmon. You know, it's kind of like the salmon are like the canary in the cave. You know, what happens to them affects our lives. And so in the center is the fetus of a human being, as well as the eggs of a salmon. So, you know, we're connected in this way, and one affects the other. What we do affects the water, the health of the water, the rivers, and the salmon, and their lives affect ours because they have given us and still do, you know, as a food source and beyond. Okay. This was a response to what was happening in North Dakota at Standing Rock, and that Julian had a piece that had also to do with this. But, you know, it's something that affects, even though it was far away, it affects all of us indigenous people, and it was a really good time to educate a lot of youth and tribal people from all over. There was people that went there from California and from our area, tribal people that went there to stand with the native people there. There was families that went and cooked for people, and people that, you know, gave sacrifice and stayed there a long time from different tribes and different, not just tribal people, but others as well. But it brought a lot of awareness. And just recently there was, I don't know what all the technical or all the details about it, but right now that there has been a stop to that pipeline, at least temporarily, and as well as I think two or three others in the United States and beyond, maybe. You know, there was a huge impact by those people standing up for what they believed in, because it's so important to their life, the water, and the effect of these pipelines on our water sources. And that's throughout the United States and Canada and probably beyond that. So it's really important to educate ourselves, to become aware, and to stand up for the rights of the water. And okay. This is a piece I did for a California Indian conference that took place at Humboldt State University. And, you know, it has to do with family and, you know, our ancestors and the relationship that we have to the world around us, to our environment, to the wildlife, and to the water, and to the food sources that the earth has provided for us, and to that we are a living people that have a living culture that still is part of us today, that we nurture and we value as sacred. And you know, there's many of us who have been involved, like my family, for probably 45 years or so in cultural revitalization, that I feel a privilege to have been a part and continue to be a part in revitalizing our ceremonies, such as our flower dance ceremonies, which is a girls' puberty ceremony for our young women that we were able to bring back. Julian and I were kind of instrumental in getting that started for the Karuk peoples. We've since 1996, when my daughter was coming of age, and another friend of ours, Kim Moon, and we were able to, after much research and making regalia and many other things, language included, prayers, and a lot of things of trying to revitalize a ceremony that hadn't taken place for over 120 years and where we didn't have living people to be able to give us a map of what to follow, that we had to do that on our own. And we were able to do that, and we are continuing to do that ceremony today. And since that time, the tribes, the local tribes in the area, besides the Karuk, the Hupa, the Yurok, the Talawa, the Snungwe, I want to mention that the Talawa had theirs the same, I think the year before we did. But anyway, that's been a beautiful thing, and as well as other ceremonies that have continued to be flourish with many efforts from many people throughout the years that in bringing these ceremonies back. And it's wonderful to see young people being involved, and people not only singing songs from our ancestors, but creating new songs, and people like Kateria that are weavers, you know, like our ancestors, that are teaching, you know, young people to become involved in their culture. I feel that being involved in culture is a form of activism. So I say to Kateria, you're definitely an activist. And, you know, anyone that, you know, takes up their culture and teaching others, and for our children, our grandchildren, and our future generations, you're activists. And our ancestors were activists in resisting, in surviving all the things they had to survive, whatever they had to do, you know. And each generation evolves and rises up to the whatever's going on, the changes that need to happen. And part of that is culture and taking care of our environment, our waters, and we have to learn our histories, know our histories, so we know what our ancestors went through, what they did, and how their spirit is what kept them going, the spirit of the land, you know, the spirit of the earth. That's where their strength comes from, and that's the strength that we have, that we can continue on to you know, to continue with who we are and our culture. Okay. And this was a piece I did last summer. That's at Humboldt State University. It was a grant through Native American Studies. Kutcha, I want to say thank you to Kutcha Risling Baldy, that she had, I believe she was the one that wrote the grant. And there's a building called the Native Forum on campus that was built somewhat like a traditional, at least to look on the outside like a traditional house, as you can see in the picture, and on the lower right-hand side, traditional Native house from our area. And anyway, there's a lobby area in the back of this building, which is then the forum is a gathering place where they have whole classes as well as other events, especially Native people coming together from not only on campus, but from the community and beyond. And that's where the conference was held that I mentioned earlier, the California Indian Conference. And anyway, in the lobby, they wanted to create a space that educates people to the people of our area of Northern California, who we are, and educate the people that are on campus, the students that are coming to campus, and others. And so in the middle is a map of Northern California. I wanted to show some of the tribal territories, traditional Aboriginal territories of our peoples in Northern California, and the languages that the word for people in our different tribes. So it has the name of a tribe, let's say Karuk, but it also has the, our traditional word for people, Adad. So I wanted to use some of our languages to show that, and then show how we are connected to our environment, to the mountains, the rivers, the ocean. And then I wanted to show some of the culture through our ceremonies and our basket weaving, and some of the other things that are important to us the wildlife. There's the eagle on one side and our woodpecker on one side, and then in the middle is the condor. And I want to mention the condor because the condor is returning. The Yurok tribe has put in a lot of effort to make this happen over the last several years to bring back the condor to our area, which was almost extinct in California, the California condor. And then there were efforts made in different parts, especially in Southern California, to bring those back. So anyway, I know I'm running out of time, so I think that's just about it.
Thank you, Lynn. That was great. I really appreciate your focus on the intergenerational aspect of your work and our cultures, and how all of this is related to, you know, our ancestors and our ancestral ties, and how that attaches to the contemporary moment and contemporary arts. And all of you, Julian, Lynn, and Kateria, I've always admired your work and your expertise on, you know, what you do. So I appreciate you all joining us today to talk. So we have about 15 minutes for a question and answer session. I'm not showing up on my screen, so I'm assuming that you all can't see me, but you can hear me, which is good. So we do have a few questions from people who have been listening in and joining us via our Zoom. So here's a question which I think is interesting. Have you seen other changes in some of the materials that you use? Sorry, the question's worded a little funny, but I'll say, have there been changes in materials that you use, whatever that might be in your forms of art, due to environmental impacts? So I'm thinking that this person might be thinking beyond water. So not just the impacts of water, but other impacts to the environment. And jump in.
Well, I was thinking that might be a question for Kateri as far as materials. I mean, because I use paints, of course. I mean, I've done gathering, and I've done a little bit of basket weaving, but not much. So I don't know, Kateri, you want to try that one?
Don't be modest, Lynn. I've seen your work. I'm gonna assume that one is for me as well. The river has a lot to do with the materials, I've noticed, especially because when we weave, they have to be constructed, you know, with the soaking. And so I've noticed that depending on what water source I'm using to soak my materials, it really it's kind of hard to explain, because I can feel there's a connection when my hands touch my material. So I can feel if it's going to be strong enough to withhold what I'm about to do with it. So I've noticed with the different waters that I pull from, whether I'm weaving in the river or if I'm weaving along a creek, or if I'm out here using city water, just the difference in the materials. When I do use some kind of filtered water with chemicals, I've noticed that my materials kind of don't take to it as well, and they kind of aren't as strong. But as far as if the materials are affected by any kind of environmental change, whether it be water or I guess water is the primary one, but also just the difference in the seasonal changes right now too. With I've noticed over the past few years with the seasons, you know, either prolonging or going into different months that we're typically gathering in. Those definitely impact my materials. You know, things that are harvested typically around, you know, one of our biggest times is in the spring. You know, if it's still frosty, you know, well into the spring, it definitely affects our materials. The water, whether or not, because there are a lot of dams, and whether or not we get enough water to come in and flood those materials, you know, all of the willows that we use a lot, whether or not there's enough water to raise the level high enough to flush out any kind of bugs or things that get onto the plant, it affects it for the harvesting stage. So I would say, yeah, definitely there's a noticeable environmental impact.
Thank you. So this question is from Regina, who is on the staff of Save California Salmon. And so she writes, I have heard Julian say at meetings on natural resources, education, and health that artists should have a seat at every table. How do we make sure that happens? And why is it so important that artists are engaged in natural resources and health discussions and decisions? And I think this is a question for everybody, but I think a very powerful question.
Yeah, I recall speaking with Regina saying that. And for example, there was a meeting yesterday with the Arcata Chamber of Commerce, and they wanted to include Native people in this process of kind of redefining the economy based on, you know, the coronavirus, its impacts and everything on the economy, and how Arcata might restart and all of that. And so I thought, well, I don't know if I really want to jump in bed with the Chamber of Commerce necessarily, but I think that that the artist, you know, does bring especially when it comes to activism, that, you know, you need to have your artists. I don't know. I think that recently activism, and I'm saying this just as an outsider looking in to what I've seen, it seems like the leadership gets really wrapped up into dogma, the leadership of all these various activistic kinds of movements or whatever it is. They get very more politically and kind of strategic and all of that. And the artist kind of remains apart from that. And so it maybe connects more with what people are feeling and what the aspiration is, what the truth is about the movement, about the goal of activism. And so I think that it's really critically important to go there, because I think that once you get strategic, it's kind of like, it becomes a different kind of movement, kind of becomes alienating because you're not listening to how people are feeling. I mean, you need to harness that. Not that artists are into harnessing other people, but they the art really, the purpose of the artist is to synthesize all of that, and then to express it in a way, to aspire and to provide an image for that captures the spirit of what you're trying to do, versus, you know, strategically reaching goal one and objective this and all of that. So that's why I think artists need to be included at the table, at the, you know, so that's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. When you know, he said the spirit of it, it's kind of like you don't want to take the spirit out of, when you're talking about land, you know, or water, that's an important thing to consider. I mean, that's not what they might think, but you know, I think we always have to keep that in mind, that the earth is a living being and the water has a spirit. And so, you know, when you think about protecting the water, you have to keep that in mind, you know. And that's kind of the basis of who we are as Indian people, as indigenous people, you know, that there is a spirit in all living things. And because people either never attuned into it or disregarded it, we're in the boat that we are in today because people haven't done that, you know. So the more we can connect with that spirit of the land and the water of the earth, the more we will have a better understanding, and in the decisions that we will make better decisions. You know, I always think of, you know, the world renewal ceremonies that we do, that and I think at one time indigenous people all around the world had some form of renewal ceremonies. And if we still did those all over the earth and believed in them, which is earth-centered, then again, we would be in a different place today, in a much better world. So I think we always need to kind of keep that in the back of our minds and our hearts. But I think art is a way of helping to bridge that gap, or bringing that to our awareness, including beautiful baskets.
Kateri, do you have anything to add to that? Not to put you on the spot.
I think that, you know, there's a lot of, everything kind of needs a balance, right? And so I think that, you know, having artists at these tables, which has happened. I've attended meetings with companies in our area, such as BLM and Caltrans and Fish and Wildlife, and trying to trying to build those connections. And trying to build those connections between the Native communities so that they can be helpful, you know, whether it's providing or recognizing different areas that we can gather from, that however they can, to facilitate being helpful for the Native communities. And you know, and it's broader than just gathering areas, or how that's helpful, but being an artist and, you know, not being in the activism realm, it's all connected, whether what piece you're involved in. So yeah, I think it's an important piece.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make too, that all of you have touched on, is like it's all connected. Like, you don't stop caring about the environment when you leave an art piece, or you don't stop thinking about that space. Like for me, I do, you know, more academia and policy work, but I don't stop thinking about how to uplift Indigenous history or promote Indigenous environmental justice when I go home. Like, it's very connected to who I am as the core of my being, of being a Hupa person. And like trying to re-engage with the cultural spaces that have been, you know, taken from me over years of colonization and imperialism, and trying to come back to these spaces. And so like with all of your art, like that's, to me, very, very powerful to see in that, the ways that we all engage in our histories and ourselves, and how we interpret that out to the world. And Lynn, I think it's really an important point that you make about world renewal, and how we need to be carrying on these ceremonies in our culture to remake the world, because that's a very real and powerful thing. It's not just something we do to do it, it's because we have a responsibility to protect the world. So I really appreciate that point too. So I have one last question, and then we can wrap up. It's actually a series of questions. So Pua writes, you all create such a deep connection with your art. Is it hard to let go of a piece of it when it's done? Do you have a process of letting go? How do you feel about your pieces being used for activism and being posted online versus feeling and seeing it in person? So there's a lot in there, and you can take components of it, but I think it's a really important question, especially as we're online right now and engaging with your pieces through this Zoom medium, and we're not seeing it in person. So any perspectives on that would be great.
Well, I'll start. So yeah, art is a very personal thing I think for most people, and it's like an extension of yourself, and you could say that about other types of art forms too. But so a part of you is in that piece, and it's also, for me, there's a certain spiritual thing that happens with art in the process of doing art, but also after it's finished, that spirit, there is a spirit in that piece, like a basket, that then you can share with other people, and people connect to these pieces in different ways. And I've gotten a lot of interesting feedback from people in what the piece means to different people and why they're drawn to a certain piece, which always surprises me. But and I don't necessarily start out like thinking, okay, I'm going to do this piece, so that it brings this certain thing to somebody else or whatever. It just sort of evolves. And, when I do a piece, I'm kind of in this other state of mind in a way, in another mode. But anyway, my work has been shared a lot. I do sell prints and cards, but I also, my pieces, a lot of the images have been used in all kinds of educational materials, from when I was just doing black and white illustrations for different Indian organizations, educational materials, language materials, posters and brochures, all kinds of stuff. And which is, a gift for me too, that I can share that with Native community. And I enjoy that. People are getting better at asking, like permission and acknowledgement, which is, there is a law that governs copyright and all that kind of stuff. But I love my work being shared and used in good, positive ways for education, for teaching, for whatever it might be. So yeah, I like it to be able to used in that way.
In response to that, I think Lynn's art lends itself also to being, as illustrative of, culture and the idea of family, the idea of community, and all of that. It's really built in a kind of a narrative kind of way, pictorial kind of way, and so I think in some ways it's pretty highly sought after that people want her art to be included. That it seems to be, she has been able to nurture that voice, and it really rings true, and it is true, knowing her. In my as far as Julian Lang goes, all of my art is for sale, and I, not in a larcenous kind of way, but it's like, it's all for sale. It's like, make me a quote. And it's, but my art is very kind of like segmented. So I'm like an orange, that all the segments in an orange. So as a writer, I don't even want to read anything I've written before. I mean, once it's sent in, you know, I can't even read it because I'll want to modify it and do a rewrite. When it comes to some of the other kinds of more performance-based things, these are so ephemeral in the moment that, you know, there's not much you can do about a piece. It's like you're paying, you're actually in kind of where people pay to see, pay to hear, and all of that. So that kind of like that interchange happens just automatically. And when it comes to like pictorial kinds of things, paintings and drawings and things like that, then I know that at a certain point, these were like my children, or these were like my pieces of my soul, you know, and I always had that thing, and no way I would ever sell this. And at a certain point, I would hoard my paints, I would hoard my paper and materials so that, you know, I would never run out. And at a certain point, you just have to just say, you know what, I'm an artist, and I'm, as quote unquote, maybe I'm a native professional artist, which means that I do create artwork for my community. That's my main audience, but it's all for sale. I mean, it's like just all for sale, because that's why I created it, to get it out and to be appreciated. And most people that end up buying the art, you know, that's the response I get too, that this is something that becomes more and more meaningful, because the art piece, first shot, looking at it in a gallery, something draws you to it, and then it grows within you, the relationship grows. So it's kind of like, you know, love at first sight. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. You know, you're kind of like you're kind of going a hit and miss there. But if it's good, then it grows, and it's better and better, and it seems more and more natural. And boy, once you're in love at that level, it's kind of hard to imagine a life without, you know, this other person. And in artwork, it's the same way. You know, we create things that people relate to in a deep way. So I think that you know, having it's awkward and weird, because other people have these deep, weird, emotionally strong feelings, and they express them to you, and you're going to go, oh boy, I don't know if well, that wasn't the intention of my artwork, but you know, I'm glad to hear that that you're relating to them so deeply and emotionally. So, you know.
Good question. And from my type of art and in my own experience, it's really hard. It is an extension of myself. I've put in a lot of hours into one piece, and a lot of work, a lot of patience. You know, because I'm there for, much like my children, I'm there for all the stages of its evolution and its creation, from even, you know, during gathering, I'm always securing and taking care of that area so that it's also going to be plentiful for the following year. And so tending to that area for years, and then so that I can ensure that it's there for the next year. All of that goes into, you know, the next stage of harvesting it, and then it's just in my hands all the time. And so to create something, and then when we do create an item, it does have a life, and it does, for me, it does have a purpose, which somebody asked me in the chat earlier about, you know, art is my work in the museums, which I've had stuff in the museums before, just for different events and shows and stuff like that. But for the most part, my work goes out into the community to serve its function as a working basket. whether it be, you know, providing the security of a sleeping area for a baby, Fallon, providing that security for a newborn, or if it's, you know, a basket for gathering, then yeah, it's really hard to let go sometimes, because it is such a strong connection to yourself.
Thank you all for those responses. I think it's all those points are really great and important to remember, as, you know, people who, for me, where I like kind of go and see it and engage in it through an emotional level, or through, you know, use, for in Carrie's example with basketry. So thank you for that. I think we're going to wrap up now. We're about 8 minutes over the 1:30 mark. But thank you, Julian, Lynn, and Kateri, for joining us. I so appreciate all of you and everything that you have done here, and then for me too, in my own personal stuff that you have done for me over the years. So I appreciate your friendship across the years that we've known each other. And thank you everybody who joined today for the Save California Salmon webinar and summer speaker series. Next week, we will have on July 17th, cultural revitalization on the water, canoe traditions in the Pacific Northwest. And I believe that will be moderated by Dr. Caitlin Reed at Humboldt State University. So those of you that are taking the certificate program, you won't see me for a little bit, but I appreciate being able to host these last two events. And I appreciate Lynn, Julian, and Kateri for joining us today. And I will be in touch with all three of you regarding other things surrounding this series. But thank you so much. And I think Carrie will sign us off.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very
Bye.
much. It was good and fun.